Today we're going to talk about the 106 items I wish I knew before getting into boating. These are kind of geared to new boaters, but every boat owner should know this. I've got it broken up into 5 different sections with chapter timestamps in the time bar below, so you can jump to one easily if you want to. The first one's going to be safety and regulations. The second one is how not to kill your outboard, how to keep it running forever. The third one is going to be performance, how to maximize the performance of your outboard. The fourth one is going to be towing, storing, and launching, and the fifth one's going to be cost. Let's go. And make sure you stay around for number 87. It is my favorite one. It's one that probably going to make some people mad, but stick around for 87. Number 1 is safety equipment, non-negotiable life jacket, fire extinguisher, emergency whistle, a throw cushion, a throw rope, anything that your state makes you have from a regulation perspective on your boats, especially if you get stopped. But the number 1 thing is you want to be safe out on the water. Number 2, if you're going on long trips by yourself, make sure somebody knows your route. I use the GPS app called Gaia. You can map out your route on this and shoot what's called a GPX file, which is basically the route GPS coordinates to somebody. Or super easy, take a screenshot on your phone of Google Maps of where you're going to be. Take the edit tool with the crayon or pencil tool and just literally draw the route where you're going to be and shoot that as a text to somebody so they know where you're going. Make sure you share your iPhone location with somebody. You can go in to Find My iPhone, set up with your wife that they can see where you are. Some people may not like that, but so they can see where you are. That way, if you get lost or your cell phone reception goes out, your GPS is still on, so they can find you by looking on Find My iPhone. It's going to show them exactly where you are. Along those lines too, you can also get a waterproof buoyant GPS to keep in your boat. That way, if you capsize, that thing is going to give off an alert. 100% waterproof. So if your phone drops out, waterproof GPS is still going to be sending out a signal to somebody. Know the laws of your local water, the buoy colors, the warning signs, because the last thing you want to do is run up on some rocks, capsize, ruin your boat, and potentially get into a fatal accident because you weren't paying attention or you didn't know what the warning signs mean. Number 5, create a checklist, everything you need to take, the safety items you need to take, and that way when you go to get ready for your trip, you're not leaving something out. It seems like almost every trip I leave something out because I did not have a super simple checklist either in the boat or on my phone. Number 6, save yourself a ticket, know the registration requirements in your state. In Tennessee, anything that is powered, whether it's a trolling motor, whether you've got a drill with a prop on the end of it, anything that is powered, electric or gas, has to be registered. Insurance, know what insurance you need, full coverage, liability, does it cover towing, does it not, does it cover capsizing, does it cover your truck going into the water when you're launching it? I've done this, I've launched this boat without a drain plug in it. I had a bigger boat, I launched that boat without a drain plug in it. Remember the drain plug, put something on the transom when you're getting ready to go, like a yellow dot or something that says, hey, did you put the drain plug in? Hey, this little thing reminding you, hey, I'm reminding you, put the drain plug in. Number 9, have a bilge pump or a hand pump. I've got water inside this boat from a hole in the back. Make sure you've got a hand pump or an electric bilge pump in your boat, so that way if you get water coming in, let's say you forget the drain plug, you're able to get that water out. Let's say you left the drain plug out, you can gun it full speed, and a lot of times that'll suck the water out of the drain plug back into the lake and allow you to at least get to the shore. Number 11, never start your boat in gear. Some of them have safety mechanisms, but if you start in gear, let's say you're standing up, pull starting it, and it's in gear, when it kicks on, it could throw you out of the boat. That boat's gonna be run away on the water. Never start your boat in gear. And if you do have a safety mechanism, check that safety mechanism every once in a while. Number 12, I do this unfortunately a lot. I'll have my trolling motor down, I'll have it accidentally pointed sideways, I'll engage it, and it just throws me sideways. It's actually knocked me out of the boat before because I had it full speed, trolling motor was pointed sideways, and knocked me out of the boat. Know that choppy water and big waves from other boats, huge fallout risk. So just know the water conditions. Is it choppy? Is there a lot of boat traffic, especially if you have small setups like this? Number 14, know the weight limitations of your boat. Usually there's a label that tells you your horsepower capacity of your boat and the weight limitations of your boat, how many number of passengers, know that. Number 15, when you're launching, know the ramp conditions before you drive down on the ramp. I've been stuck on a ramp. It is not fun. It was muddy. There was some algae and I could not get my truck back up the ramp. I had to get somebody with a chain to help pull me up the ramp. It is a very scary situation. Number 16, get you a small toolkit. You may need to pull the spark plug if your motor floods or if something happens and you can't get it started. You may need to pull the prop off if you get it wound up with a bunch of fishing line or with a rope. So know what tools, small tools you need in order to do just some minor maintenance, especially if you get stranded. Number 17, emergency procedure. Hopefully it never happens, but it honestly happens to a lot of people. You get out on the water, especially if a river, if you're on some generating water or something with current and your motor dies and you can't get it started, know what you're gonna do, know where everything is, have a secondary way to get to shore. And if you can't get to shore, have a way to get to something and tie off so you don't get continually moved downstream, because the worst thing that can happen is if you're on a body of water with a lot of current, your motor dies and a bridge is coming up or some sort of structure is coming up that you've got to avoid. Along those lines, number 18, have a secondary way to get back to the ramp, whether that's a trolling motor, with a fully charged battery. Make sure you have an oar. Just know that you are okay getting back to the ramp if your motor dies. Have a tow rope so somebody can tow you back. Know what you're gonna do if your motor dies and you've got a couple of miles to get back to the boat ramp. Number 20, if you fall out of the boat, you gotta be able to get back in the boat. Make sure you have some sort of way to get back in the boat if you're in deep water and you need to re-enter. Know if your boat has a step ladder. Do you need some sort of ladder to get back in? Are you able to get back in the boat without flipping it over? Number 21, know the water. Know the generation schedule if you're on a river. Know the currents, know the tide. Know what you're getting into before you go on a trip. It could save your life. Most of the time when you're out with people, they are the ones that get you in trouble. Make sure they understand just some basic rules. Make sure everybody's cool, knows some basic rules and aren't acting stupid. The next one is obvious alcohol, common sense. Alcohol on the boat, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Just don't do it. You have to take a boater safety course. Take one online. That's going to teach you what the buoys mean. That's going to teach you how to handle different situations. That's going to teach you a lot of the basic captain stuff that's, really honestly cool to know, ways that probably will impress a lot of people. So take an online boating course. I think it'll be worth it. Okay, now we're moving into the section, how not to kill your outboard. And the first one in this section is know your outboard, read the manual, get familiar with all the parts. You need to know where they are, where's your carburetor, where's the fuel pump, where's the fuel filter. You need to be familiar with it. That way if something happens, you can be able to troubleshoot it yourself without having to take it to somebody and spend hundreds of dollars. Number 28, always, every time you start your outboard, check to make sure that cooling water is pissing out of the telltale hole. If it's not, you could burn your motor up within a matter of minutes. You've got to know that if it starts running hot, you've got to know the signs. This could start smoking. You could start smelling some burnt oil. Thermostat is one thing that you need to check once you get out of the water and get it home. Also, the water pump impeller, probably the most common thing that will cause your motor to overheat. So if you're having issues with the cooling water not coming out, that's going to be the water impeller. Number 31, never start your outboard outside of the water. It needs that cooling water to stay cool, but also your impeller needs water to kind of lubricate itself. It's rubber, it's in a plastic housing. When you run it dry, it runs the risk of tearing itself apart. So even if it's just for a second, it's best to never start your motor outside of the water. Number 32, know how to change your water impeller. It's super easy. You drop the lower end unit, you change it out. The hardest part is getting the lower end back in. That's really frustrating, but you could save yourself hundreds of dollars by doing it yourself. You literally can do it within 30 minutes. It's not that complicated. I've got some maintenance videos if you want to check them out, link them in the description. Number 34, you got to make sure that your outboard is sized properly for your boat. The cavitation plate is supposed to be parallel with the bottom of the boat, so make sure that you have the right size outboard. They come in short, long shaft lengths, so you can't just go buy some random outboard. You got to know what size that you need to fit your boat. Number 35, know how to transport your outboard. If you put this Mercury on the wrong side, if you lay it down, it could ruin it. Oil can leak through the, I think it's called the oil breather, into the cylinder and just cause you all kinds of problems. This guy has to be laid down with the tiller handle down. Look in your manual, see which ways that it can lay down, because if you lay this guy down the wrong way, it could damage it. Also, if you lay it down before all the water is drained out, then that could cause water to backflow through the exhaust into the cylinder. That's bad. And then also if it's winter, and that water could freeze if it hasn't fully drained out if you lay it down before draining the water. Number 36, you have to winterize these guys before the winter. Once again, If all the cooling water hasn't drained out, they could freeze, crack something. If you have a small leak in the prop seal in the lower end unit, water can get in your lower end oil and cause your lower end to crack. Also, gas can gum up, causing a lot of carb issues. So you have to know exactly what steps you need to winterize your guy to make sure it's running good for the next season. Sometimes you gotta store this guy for a long period of time. If you're not gonna use it, you gotta know what to do, because long-term storage, not running it, is the easiest way to kill an outboard. You need to fog the cylinder, you need to drain the fuel system. Just know when you store it long-term that there could be a lot of damage, and there's some steps you need to do to prevent that. The next one is oil change. Oil change on these guys are super simple. Like Mercury 4, 5, and 6, they don't even have an oil filter. It's just you drain the oil, put 15 ounces back in, and you're good to go. Make sure you change the oil every year, every 100 hours. Know how to do it. It can save you a couple $100. It literally takes 10 minutes. You also need to change the lower gear unit oil in your outboard on an annual basis, especially before winter. If you're in saltwater, you need to inspect and change the anode when needed. That attracts corrosion away from all the other metal parts. It is meant to be a sacrificial part of your outboard. You need to inspect it and change it when needed. Number 41, if you're in saltwater, you need to flush your motor. These have quick connects where you can hook up, get an attachment, hook up to a hose pipe so you don't have to run it into a bucket, or you can just run it in a bucket of fresh water after your trips on the saltwater. Keep corrosion out of your engine block. Number 42, the easiest way to destroy this is having rope hanging off the side of the boat, or line. Some people call it a line hanging out the side of your boat. That rope could get caught up in your prop. If you're going full throttle and that prop seizes up because the rope is wrapped around it, it's going to do a lot of damage to your drive shaft. Make sure you don't have anything hanging outside of your boat. Number 43 is hitting underwater structure. You want to avoid that at all costs. If you hit something that's going to damage your prop, this motor is designed to lift up if it hits something, so it doesn't absolutely destroy your lower end, but it's good to know how deep of water you're in. Get a cheap depth finder. It's saved me a lot from running up on shallow water with shallow rocks. Number 44, if you are running in shallow water, this guy has a shallow trim position to get the prop up out off the bottom of the river or lake, but you do risk sucking up a lot of sediment. That's going to cause damage to your water impeller and potentially cause damage to your cooling system or clog it up. And the final one for how not to kill your motor is keep a maintenance log. I always forget to do something at the end of the season or the middle of the season. Keep a log of everything that your manual says you need to do. Just a simple piece of paper, write it down, write the frequency, and if you did it, when you did it. And that way you're not missing something and you're not going a couple of years without an oil change. The next section is how to maximize performance of your boat setup. Number 45, trim position. You have to be able to plane out your boat to be able to get max speed out of your setup. The main driver, and if you're able to plane out and how good of a plane you get and what your max speed is going to be, is trim position. I did a full video on how to trim it. I'll put a link in the description and link up top. Basically, trim is the angle of your outboard, and that's going to set your planing position and help you gain max speed. Along those lines, you got to know if you're planing well. If the bow of your boat is dragging a lot of water, maybe you need to put some weight in the back of your boat. If the bow of your boat's sticking straight up in the air and you can't get it to plane out, maybe you need to put a little bit more weight in the front or change your trim position. So weight distribution and knowing if you plane out well, that is the only way for you to hit max speed for your outboard. But number 50 is always try to use non-ethanol gas. Ethanol gas attracts water, causes corrosions. It will gum up your carburetor faster than non-ethanol gas. Always try to get non-ethanol gas when you can, because it's better for your fuel system in the long run. Number 51, the number one starting issue with an outboard is a dirty carb. And what that does is it impacts the gas flow from your gas tank, gas pump, through the carb to the engine. It impacts that flow. Prop pitch size. See, prop pitch is, in perfect conditions, how far your prop would travel in one rotation. So a prop pitch of 8 inches would travel 8 inches with one revolution. A prop pitch of 7 inches will travel 7 inches with one revolution in perfect conditions. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but the lower the pitch size, the more revolutions per foot of travel, that means more power. It's like gearing ratio. If you're pedaling up a hill on a mountain bike, the lower the gear, the more revolutions you have or pedals you have, but the less power it takes, but the more power your bike has to go up the hill. It's going to go slower, but it's going to have more power. Pitch size, the lower you go, is going to give you more acceleration, more starting power, and help you plane out better. It will hurt your top speed, but a lot of times what matters is getting the boat on plane in a good plane position, and more power usually helps with that. Another issue with starting is flooding the scat. Flooding is when the carb gives the engine too much gas and the spark plug gets saturated with gas and it won't spark. If that happens, if you have minor flooding issues, the best thing to do is kill the choke, open the throttle all the way up, and try to start it with full throttle, being ready to kill the throttle once it starts. What that does is it increases airflow through the engine and helps dry out the spark plug and get all of that extra gas out the exhaust. If you have major flooding and you smell a lot of gas or seeing gas leak, just stop, get back to the shore and see what the problem is, because you don't want to start an engine if you have major flooding issues, because it could be a fire hazard. Number 53, if you are having major flooding issues, know that the float in the carburetor is usually the #1 culprit. It can get stuck, it can get saturated where it doesn't float, it could get debris or gummed up on the valve that it controls. Usually the float and the inlet valve of the carburetor are the #1 sources of issue for that. Number 55, also if you're having starting issues, but the engine runs fine once you get it started, look at cleaning your idle jet. That is the kind of the pathway of gas when you're idling this or starting this that gives the engine the proper amount of gas when starting or running at really low speeds. Gumming up or contamination in your idle jet will absolutely impact starting performance of your outboard. Number 56, the #2 issue with starting is fuel delivery to the carb. So there you want to look at dirty fuel filter, you want to look at is your fuel pump working, you want to look at an external gas tank, is the priming bulb actually sending gas to the carb and getting everything primed, is your internal tank, is the vent open. Just know that carbs is usually the #1 issue. #2 issue is usually getting gas to the carburetor for why your outboard won't start. I didn't even know this guy had a fuel pump, but there is a small fuel pump that the motor controls. There's kind of a linkage tied to, I guess, the crankshaft that pumps gas from the tank to the carburetor. It's not a gravity flow, there's actually a fuel pump. If that goes bad, a lot of times you just need to replace the diaphragm, because a lot of times they'll get hard and will not pump gas effectively. Number 60, know how to check fuel flow on this guy. We talked about fuel pump, we talked about the carb. What you can do is you can take the little drain plug out of the carburetor bowl, and then at that point, put it in a bucket, the motor in a bucket, pull it to start it. If you see gas coming out of that drain, then you know gas is getting from your gas tank to the carburetor. And then at that point, you know your fuel pump's good, you know you don't have any blockages with your fuel filter, and that everything's good up into your carb. The next one, shallow water drive. This guy has a shallow water drive, so if you're in shallow water, you don't want to have the prop and the motor in the downward position, because you're going to end up hitting something. So you can put this motor up in shallow water position. That gets the motor up out of the water as high as it possibly can, but still getting cooling water through the system. So check out shallow water drive. It can save your prop and save your lower end. Know where your fuse box is, have extra fuses. If something doesn't work, usually you want to start at the fuse box to see if there's any blown fuses. A lot of times that gets forgotten about, but a lot of times that also is the first place you need to look when you're starting having issues with your boat, with your setup, or with anything electrical in your system. Number 65, inspect your prop for damage. If your prop is damaged, it's going to cause cavitation, which is going to hurt performance and potentially cause further damage to your prop. And also know the difference between cavitation and ventilation. If your prop is ventilating, that means it's too high up, too close to the water, and it's getting some turbulence from the boat. Once it hits that turbulence, you lose all that forward propulsion, because it's trying to push against the air bubbles in the water and all that. So always inspect your prop. If you start losing grip, know that it's either probably cavitation from damage of the prop or ventilation position of the prop in the water. If your motor is getting a lot of ventilation, or if your prop is sitting too low in the water, look at getting a jack plate. That's going to get your prop and your motor in the right position so you can maximize performance and get the best planing and power out of your outboard that you can. Number 67, float pods. If you've got a big setup, heavy outboard, float pods are boxes you either weld on or bolt on the back of your boat. That's going to give it more stability. It's going to get the back of your boat up out of the water. It's going to help you plane out better and give you overall better performance. So funny, I have so many people ask me, do I need to mix oil and gas in my 4-stroke Mercury? I'm like, no dude, you need to know the difference between a 2-stroke and a 4-stroke, and know which one that you prefer, and know the differences. They're both, in my opinion, absolutely great, but you need to know the difference between a 2-stroke and a 4-stroke before you get on the market for a new motor. At least so you know what you're talking about when you're talking to somebody. Spark plug can get built up on the tip, that if you flood it, you could foul out your spark plug. It could get carbon buildup. So know that you can clean those, look up ways to clean it, or honestly, they're cheap. Just replace it if you start to have spark issues. Look at getting a spark tester. That's going to tell you if you're getting spark to the spark plug. If you're getting spark to the spark plug, that still doesn't mean your spark plug is good. It just means that your ignition system and your motor is good. At that point, you probably need to clean the tip of your spark plug or just go ahead and replace it. Number 71, if your motor's been sitting for a couple months, before you go on that first trip, it is best to run it in a bucket or run it at home on a hose pipe. That way you know that everything is running properly before you get out on the water. It's the worst thing that can happen is you drive an hour, get on the water, and something is not working or it won't start. So always test it, get it warmed up at home first. The next section is towing and launching. Number 81, we've all seen YouTube videos of trailers rolling down the highway not attached to a truck. So towing safety is huge. Always use safety chains. Always strap down to make sure your boat is not bouncing around on the highway. Know the ball size and that everything is matched up correctly with trailer to your vehicle, because that is going to be a bad day if you ever have a trailer hop off the ball. I've had it before. It's scary. So make sure that you've got the correct setup, that it's not going to go off into a ditch or hit another car. Number 82, know what position your outboard needs to be in when you're towing it. The manual says for this guy that it needs to be in operating position all the way down, because if you click it up and it's in, let's say, shallow water or all the way up in level position, if you hit a bump, it'll lose that position. The lever will jump out of position and it'll fall down. And that can cause huge amount of damage, a large amount of damage to your outboard, to your prop and lower end unit. So the best thing to do is look at getting a transom saver. It'll take all the force of the outboard, put it onto your trailer, and it keeps the outboard from bouncing around when you go over bumps. Need to know what your limitations of your vehicle are. Is so funny. I've seen little cars trying to launch huge boats on slick ramps, their front tires just spinning. So know what type of vehicle you have and its limitations. Know the condition of your tires and the condition of the boat ramp. The worst thing that can happen is you start losing traction on a ramp, or if your vehicle just can't handle the weight of the boat or the angle of the ramp and you get into a bad situation. Number 84, always have a spare tire for your trailer. I've been in situations where I've had a flat, didn't have a spare tire. I had to leave the boat on the side of the road. That is a horrible feeling. Make sure you have a spare tire and it's mounted securely on your trailer. Number 85, I use a chalk on the ramp because I am so scared that, especially on slick ramp, I lose traction and go down in the water. Everybody says, just put the emergency brake on. That's okay, but the emergency brake only locks in your rear tires, so your front still rotate freely. So I use a chalk when I'm launching by myself, or there's also a little tool. It's a rod that pushes your brake pedal down and lodges against the seat. That way your front brakes are also locked on the ramp. Number 86, you got to practice your trailer backing, man. I've been on ramps and people almost hit me. I've seen somebody hit a garbage can on the side of the ramp. I've seen somebody hit a gas pump at the gas station. Practice your backing of your trailer. Each trailer is different lengths, so they act differently. So make sure that you're comfortable with backing your trailer before you get out on the road and put a big hole in your boat or somebody else's. Just, yeah, do that. Number 87, the one everybody's been waiting for. The number one tip that I can give you, kind of hidden in the middle of all this, is subscribe to this channel, because I have other tips coming. Okay, a lot of people probably are going to be mad at that, but I had to do it. Viewer retention, subscribers, the only two things that really matter in YouTube, so sorry. Storage and cost is the next section. My numbers are all messed up. I don't even know where we are, 88. All right, storage is a major issue and a major cost, so know the storage before you go in to buying a boat. Store outside, you've got to have a cover, help preserve it. It hasn't been perfect, but if you can't store it in a garage and you can't store it in a storage unit somewhere that's already covered, make sure you get some sort of cover for your boat. Know the annual maintenance and cost before you get a boat. If you get a big boat, annual maintenance and cost could be $1,000 to $1,500 a year. So know what you're getting into before you purchase a boat. And go ahead and budget, depending on the size of your boat, $1,000 to $2,000 a year in maintenance, winterizing, and general repairs. A lot of people forget about registration and insurance. You're gonna have to register your boat. It's an annual cost. You're gonna have to have insurance on your boat. It's an annual cost. Maybe there's more insurance for towing, liability, full coverage. All of that adds up. So make sure you budget in before you buy a boat. Fuel cost. is huge, especially if you live an hour away. Like, fuel for running this guy is not that bad, but actually getting into the water, if it's an hour once a week, it's a lot of money. So make sure you budget in. Basically what I'm saying is owning a boat is expensive with all of these things. So don't forget about the vehicle cost of the fuel for your vehicle to get to where you're going, plus the fuel for your boat setup as well. Trailer tires, you're gonna have to replace the tires on your trailer. That's an added cost. You're just adding up more and more and more. Last one from a cost perspective is all the cool gear. You can drop tens of thousands of dollars in gear, live scope, all of this cool stuff that you may not need. The more you limit that, honestly, I think the more fun you're gonna have just having a small, simple, minimal setup to get you out on the water and not spend a lot of money. So there you have it, roughly 106. I don't know, I lost count. Hopefully it didn't bore you to death testing out bigger lists versus the top 10. But probably lost everybody at about number 4, but I appreciate the view. If you did hang out for the entire video, which I guarantee you nobody has done, I really do appreciate it. Add some more items down in the comments if you want to. Appreciate it. Have an amazing rest of the day. Get out on the water. Weather's getting great this season. Appreciate it. Later.